We face many points of inflection in our careers and our lives, from new jobs and promotions to difficult bosses and layoffs. If we had all the time and resources possible, we could certainly figure it out eventually, but we don't. The challenge is that we're walking into roles where expectations are sky high, timelines are crunched, and there isn't much patience. So you need an accelerator, and that's exactly where coaching can help. Think of coaching as a catalyst for your success. In Coaching Ahas, we share stories of leaders, their courage and vulnerability to lean into coaching, and the breakthroughs that change their lives forever. Welcome to Coaching Ahas, where we share real stories of talented coaches and clients, one aha at a time. My guest today is Supriti Bhandary, a fellow coach and business executive. I've known Supriti for years, so this is a treat. Supi, welcome, finally.
Likewise, Chana. It's a pleasure to be here with you today.
You are, I think, one of the first people I ever met when I started working. So it's really cool that I get to do this with you.
How cool is it that we've stayed in touch across time and space? Huh?
Decades.
Yes. Let's not age ourselves or date ourselves.
Yes, let's not. Let's not. Okay, so let's jump right in. Our goal here is to share stories of leaders and their breakthroughs. I know you have a story in mind, so paint the picture for us. Tell us a bit about this leader. What were they facing as a challenge, and why did they come to you?
I'll probably just set a little bit of context about
Sure.
the leader, right? So this was a very successful leader, CXO of a, I'd say $40 billion company, a very large global team. This is a leader who's really successful. He's identified for bigger and better, roles. And so how is it that he can expand his leadership range,
Hmm.
right, in a way that's more inclusive? And I'll explain what I mean by that. I think with this leader, there was a little bit of a reputational issue around him leading with a very narrow inner circle of trust.
Oh, okay.
And this often happens, I think, at the C-suite where people come in from outside into an
Mhm.
existing setup, and they often end up hiring a few of their uh, previous
Right.
life people, right? So because no leader is successful by
Like their people.
but it's really because they're trying to build capability, and so they tap into people they know because that's the network they have, right? And yet I think reputationally what it creates for them is sometimes this idea that this person is now got their favorites, and they lean on only a few people who are getting all the plum assignments and all of that, right?
Yeah.
So that was the context, and I think the CEO, the board, I think they were concerned that if this person got boxed in as this individual who could only work with only a very narrow set of people, that might
Yeah.
limit their ability to lead broader and bigger enterprise level things.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of entry coach.
That is such an interesting story and an example because it is a lot more common than we think it is, right? Because we see this often. We hire really successful leaders externally because we believe they're bringing in certain capability. They come in and see the organization and realize that there's a huge capability gap. They end up tapping people that they know to come into assignments, but it causes a huge issue within the new organization because everyone's wondering, oh my God, this leader has their favorites. They can only work with certain people. They don't pass on information to everybody. They only rely on certain people. And often, I think leaders are so successful having done that they find it difficult to actually integrate both rather than just rely on the people that they have just hired. So, this sounds like a really challenging assignment. Tell me more. What happened?
So, as we always do, right? We begin with assessment.
Mm.
That's what we did here. So the usual sort of psychometric, 360, cognitive, like a battery of assessments. And I actually think for this leader, the 360 was really powerful,
Oh, okay.
because sometimes at that level, they don't hear the truth.
Mm.
It always surprises me how companies are willing to, hire coaches and external advisors to come and give feedback to their people, especially if it's tough feedback, right?
True,
Right.
true.
So one specific belief system that this leader had was, and he generally believed this, and I think it was true, is that he really cared about everybody. And he believed in, fairness and being equitable and all that. So his belief was, I am the same to everybody.
Ah, interesting. Hmm.
Right? And so he kept saying, like, I don't know why these people think I'm not inclusive. I'm the same with everybody.
Yeah.
Right? And I thought that was such an interesting thing to unpack for him. Like, why
Mm.
are you the same with everybody? Like, people who've known you for like 15 years, that's fine. But people who haven't known you, you have to actually show up a bit differently, right? So I think that was a big shift for him to just notice that, yeah, I should not be the same with everybody.
Yeah.
It's such a basic idea, right?
What's interesting about the story is that he was expecting that the new organization would figure out how to
Yes.
work with him rather than him having to figure out how to
Exactly.
integrate them. So
Yeah.
interesting.
So, one of the things that I find with leaders is especially the driven, results-oriented people, right? They're very quick to move from one success to another
Mm,
without pausing to acknowledge, without pausing to celebrate. So even in the 360, right, little themes came up. Like
mm,
this leader thought that he was recognizing people.
mm,
And yet the feedback was actually his recognition is in the form of gratitude.
mm.
It's such a nuanced thing. It's not recognition, it's just gratitude, right?
Yeah.
So, things like that. Like, so sometimes I think it's fascinating how people experience our actions. And when you play that back is when the leaders realize that, yeah, actually, when I keep saying thank you, I'm not really recognizing them. I'm just being grateful.
Yeah.
But in my mind, I'm thinking I'm appreciating all my people appropriately.
How interesting. What it also shows is that, the leader was doing things as they saw it right to do rather than understanding what their people wanted from them, which is also nuanced but fascinating how that can make such a huge difference. There are so many powerful insights I'm sure the leader had working with you. Is there one particular moment of breakthrough that stands out for you?
I think for this person, very smart, very capable, full of opinions. Right?
Mm.
So even this idea of how do you use questions as a way of
Yeah.
moving the conversation forward,
Hmm. Okay.
right? Because we always think of questions as information gathering tools, right? You're asking me questions, I'm providing you information.
Hmm.
But as a coach, when you think of leader as a coach, right? Can we use questions to move the conversation forward? So, for example, if somebody in his team is making a presentation and if he disagreed, he would come
Hmm.
and say, this is not going to work.
Yeah.
Now, if you just think about that slightly differently, so what's a question I can ask as a leader?
Hmm.
What risks do you guys see with this? Right? So, really, that whole active listening bucket, Shana,
Hmm.
which is, asking questions, what and how questions, not why questions.
Yeah.
Right? A lot of leaders are wired for efficiency, so they just focus on the whys, and it's so triggering. And I don't mean why as the big purpose, Simon Sinek why, but
Yeah.
just like, why are you guys saying this?
Yeah.
And then people get very defensive. So just reframing that with what and how uh,
Yeah.
has been, I think, powerful.
Yeah. What's really interesting is that also asking the question instead of immediately jumping to share your opinion is almost like you're holding your opinion back so that you're not tainting the
Yeah,
opinion of the group, right? You're not inducing groupthink. You're
yeah,
asking the question and letting it flow before you make up your own mind, also, right? And then sharing potentially your opinion, which
yeah,
is also so powerful.
yeah.
Such a great story. Any other moment of breakthrough that you want to share on this one?
I think maybe the last technique I will talk about is the yes and. I
Mm,
am such a big fan. It comes from
mm,
improv, I think, but all of us, I just used a but myself. But all of us, right? Like the yes but is like so built
ingrained.
in. And the yes and is actually such a nice and powerful way of influencing people, which I
Mm,
think even for this individual. So a lot of his goals were downwards, like in terms of leading the team, but I think he had one goal around even that peer group
Mm.
What alliances was he forging and so on. And so the yes and was something that was very helpful for him in those relationships.
Yeah. It's almost like making the thinking expansive versus narrow.
Correct.
Ah, that's a really good one. So let's pivot a little bit to talk about you. You've had such a successful corporate career. What drew you to the world of coaching and why is it important to you?
I honestly think I just fell into the world of coaching. I don't think there was any grand design. The company that I was with was actually, we used to work with a lot of coaches. So we used to work with 2 or 3 large leadership development firms. And so I was a buyer, right? I was on the other side. And then, one day my boss said, none of us know much about coaching. Why don't you go and get certified? So we actually know what we're doing here with all these, suppliers, vendors, right? Partners. So I was like, okay, because everybody else was too busy to spend 1 year learning, how to be an executive coach on top of their day job. So I got that, and I think it was just such a pivotal shift in my life, right? Like that experience of going deep, because I think we can't really be transformational coaches unless we do deep work ourselves on
Yeah.
ourselves, right? So for me, I think that year and a half really sort of, I was in my corporate role, but then it really made clear to me, uh, what were some values I held, and was my life in full alignment with those values.
Mm.
And I thought that being a full-time coach would take me closer to that alignment. So that's what I've been doing. And I've always been fascinated by the stories of others. I mean, you know this. You and I can spend 6 hours just
Yes.
uh, you know, listening and talking and sharing, and we're inherently curious, right? And not in a negative way, but really curious about people, their motivations. And I'm always inspired by the stories of others.
Yeah. And so, why is that important to you?
I see it as this: I help others so I can help myself,
Ah, I love that.
right? So, for example, I'll give a very specific example. A lot of my life has been about avoiding conflict.
Mm.
And now I coach on conflict, right? And it has helped me so much.
Mm.
I'm still very much a work in progress, but I think I've improved a lot. But it's those little things, right? I think I coach others so I can help myself. We help others, yeah. But that's perhaps at a more philosophical level. On a concrete level, I care deeply about making an impact in the world.
Yeah.
And I think leaders undervalue their own impact. Today, I was talking
Yeah.
to a leader who was a team of 600 people or something. I was telling him
Mm.
that you impact, assuming 3 people per household, right?
Yes,
Almost 2,000
exactly.
people every day. Um, and so, if you can improve 0.5% of your,
Impact.
yeah, positive impact, right?
Yeah.
Not negative impact. Yeah, just see what it can do to the world, right? So.
I love that. Is there perhaps a point of inflection in your career where you wish you had had coaching but didn't? And how might that have helped?
Let me give you one specific example. There was a time where we used to participate in all these development programs, right? So through that, I got some feedback, and in that it was like, okay, very operationally driven versus, being more strategic. And, initially it was like, oh, I'm very strategic, what does this mean? And then I looked at my calendar and said, where am I spending my time, right?
Yeah.
And that was a really nice wake-up call. uh,
Yeah.
and maybe mid-career. But I think that really helped me shape the next decade or so of my career in a very different
Yeah.
way. I don't know if I hadn't gotten that feedback, I would have continued to go down the path of tactical results, perhaps, versus
Yeah.
big picture shaping.
And part of it is just where you focus, right? You get really good at where you focus.
Yeah.
And it was a wake up call to also bring in other areas into your focus.
Yeah.
So that's such a great example. As you look back at your journey, having coached, of course, through your career, but also now more specifically as an executive coach, what have you learned about yourself?
You can get better at something that you work on. So I'll tell you this big learning. If you frame something as a chore versus a skill,
Mm.
nobody's trying to get better at a chore. Rajan, my husband, right? It is his job to keep garbage out every Friday, right? Or whenever the garbage truck comes. It's a chore. But then one day he's trying to see how fast he can take it down the driveway. And he's, now suddenly it's a skill, right? And he's having fun with this thing, right? Not to trivialize it, but I think very often we think of development as a chore. Like, oh my
Mm.
God, I have to learn how to be more political, or I have to learn how to influence better, right? And we literally think of it as a chore. Nobody's trying to get better at a chore, Shana. But if you think of it as a skill, right? It's okay.
Yeah.
It'll be clunky at first. We get better. That's kind of my big aha is you get better with time. Just be kind to yourself along the way.
Mm. Okay. Last question for you, Supi. What's your favorite coaching question?
What would you like to see happen?
Ah, oh, that's such a good one. Powerful. Thank you so much, Supi. This was so much fun. So many great learnings for our listeners. I truly appreciate it.
Likewise, thank you.